learned early that love in our house was conditional. It came with rules, silence, and expectations I was never allowed to question. My father believed children existed to reflect their parents' success, not to build lives of their own. From the outside, he was respected, spoken of as disciplined, principled, hardworking. Inside our home, he was distant, sharp-tongued, and always disappointed. He rarely asked how my day went. When he did, it felt like an interrogation, not concern. Grades were never good enough, dreams were impractical, and emotions were weakness. If I cried, he said I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, he said I was ungrateful. There was no version of me that felt right in his eyes. My mother tried to protect me in small ways. An extra plate of food, a quiet hug in the kitchen, whispered encouragement when he wasn't around. But she was tired. Years of shrinking herself had worn her thin, and sometimes survival meant silence. I learned that lesson too well. School became my refuge. Books didn't judge me. Equations made sense when people didn't. Teachers noticed my effort, and for the first time, someone said, "You're capable." I held onto those words like oxygen. I studied not because I wanted praise, but because failure felt dangerous. Education was my only exit door, and I couldn't afford to miss the handle. When college acceptance letters came, I opened them alone. My hands shook as I read words that felt unreal. Congratulations. We are pleased to inform you. I ran to my father, heart pounding, ready to share something that mattered. He glanced at the letter. Nodded once, "Now figure out how to pay for it," he said. That was the moment I understood. My future was mine alone. I worked nights and weekends. I applied for scholarships he never helped research. I filled out financial aid forms with no guidance, learned words like deferment and interest. Before I learned how to rest, while other students went home on weekends, I stayed on campus, working shifts, studying under fluorescent lights, eating whatever I could afford. Every semester felt like survival. There were days I was exhausted to the bone, days I wondered if it would be easier to quit. But quitting meant going back, and going back meant disappearing again. Through it all, my father remained distant. He didn't ask about my classes. He didn't attend any events. When relatives asked about my studies, he answered vaguely, as if my achievements were footnotes to his life. Yet somehow, when others praised me, his chest lifted just a little. As graduation approached, something changed. Suddenly, he wanted updates, asked about the ceremony date, insisted on attending. He bought a new suit and practiced smiling in the mirror. He talked about how proud he was loudly, to others, to me. He said nothing. I should have been happy. Any child would want their parents' pride, but something about it felt wrong, too sudden, too performative. Like he was stepping onto a stage that wasn't built for him. The night before graduation, I sat alone in my dorm room, staring at my cap and gown. I thought about every night I cried quietly so no one would hear. Every time I chose endurance over comfort. Every sacrifice no one applauded. This degree wasn't a gift. It was a battle I survived. And tomorrow, I would finally stand in the light whether he approved or not. Graduation morning arrived dressed in sunlight and nervous energy. The campus buzzed with laughter, camera flashes, and families carrying flowers that smelled like pride. Everywhere I looked, parents hugged their children, whispering encouragement, wiping tears. I tried not to stare. I told myself I didn't need that. I had made it here on my own, and that had to be enough. As I put on my gown, my hands trembled, not from fear of the stage, but from something heavier. A quiet dread I couldn't explain. My father arrived early, standing straighter than usual, his new suit crisp, his smile practiced. He greeted people I'd never seen before as if he belonged to the moment more than anyone else. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't say congratulations. Instead, he said, "Make sure you walk confidently. People are watching. People." The ceremony hall filled quickly. The air hummed with anticipation. I found my seat among my classmates, adjusting my cap while scanning the crowd. My father sat near the front, closer to the aisle than I expected. He waved when he saw me, as if we shared a private understanding. I looked away. The dean began speaking. Words about perseverance, resilience, and sacrifice echoed across the hall. Each sentence felt personal, like it was stitched from my own sleepless nights. I held my program tightly, tracing my name printed in neat ink. Proof that I existed, that I had earned this. Then, before the first graduate was called, something happened. My father stood. At first, I thought he was confused, maybe looking for the restroom, but he stepped toward a nearby microphone reserved for faculty announcements. There was a pause, a flicker of uncertainty, before he laughed lightly and spoke. "I just want to say." He began, voice confident, that as a parent this moment means everything. Watching your child succeed after all the sacrifices you've made, it's worth it. The audience chuckled politely. He continued, "She wouldn't be standing here without my guidance. Every late night, every struggle, every decision. I made sure she stayed on track. This degree is a family achievement." Applause erupted. It felt like the room tilted. I couldn't breathe. Family achievement. I remembered begging him to help pay an application fee and being told to stop being dramatic. I remembered working double shifts while he slept comfortably at home. I remembered the silence when I needed advice, the criticism when I needed support. And now, strangers were clapping for him. My face burned, but my body felt frozen. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth, but years of conditioning held me still. "Don't cause a scene, don't embarrass him, don't speak." The applause faded, and he returned to his seat, satisfied. My name was called shortly after. I stood on legs that felt like they didn't belong to me. As I walked toward the stage, my heart pounded so loudly I thought others might hear it. This was supposed to be my moment, the finish line of years of sacrifice. Instead, it felt stolen, rewritten in someone else's voice. Halfway to the stage, a ceremony coordinator gently stopped me. She leaned in and whispered, "If you'd like to say a few words, you may." I looked at the microphone ahead. I thought of the nights I chose hunger over failure, the days I smiled through exhaustion, the years I stayed silent to keep peace that was never real. I realized something then. Silence had never protected me. It had only protected him. I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward, not in anger, not in desperation, but with a calm I had never known. If this moment was going to be taken from me, I would take it back, and I would do it with the truth. The microphone felt heavier than it looked. As I stood there, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Faces blurred into a sea of expectation, pride, and curiosity. Somewhere in the front row, my father leaned back comfortably, certain the story had already been written, with him at its center. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, steady but strong. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. I had been taught my whole life to minimize myself, to smooth over discomfort, to protect his image, even when it cost me my own. Speaking now meant breaking that pattern. It meant choosing myself in front of everyone. I inhaled slowly. I didn't look at the audience. I looked directly at him. Memories rushed through me in flashes, countless nights studying alone. The hum of fluorescent lights, rejection emails, overdue notices, and quiet tears swallowed in silence. None of that belonged to him. None of it had ever been shared. The coordinator nodded gently, giving me permission. I spoke clearly, calmly, without emotion cracking my voice. He never paid check the records, 7 words. They didn't echo loudly, but they landed hard. The applause died instantly, cut short like a breath held too long. Whispers rippled across the hall. People shifted in their seats, unsure if they had heard correctly. The air felt thick, charged with something no one had prepared for. I handed the microphone back and stepped aside. My father's smile vanished. At first, he laughed nervously, waving a dismissive hand as if I had made a joke in poor taste. But laughter couldn't undo what had already been released. A truth, once spoken, doesn't ask permission to exist. 2 university officials approached him quietly. They spoke in low voices, their expressions serious. One of them held a folder. I knew that folder. Months earlier, I had submitted financial documentation, scholarship records, loan agreements, aid letters. after the university questioned a claim my father had made about being a primary contributor. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I didn't expect it to matter. Now it did. He shook his head, his face tightening. His voice rose, sharp and defensive. "This is a misunderstanding," he said loudly. "I supported her in other ways." The officials didn't argue. Security was called. The movement caught everyone's attention. Heads turned, phones lowered, the room buzzed with confusion. My father stood abruptly, anger flushing his face as two security officers approached his row. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "I'm her father." One officer spoke calmly. "Sir, we need you to step outside." The words felt unreal. As they guided him toward the aisle, his eyes finally met mine. Not with authority, not with pride, but with something close to fear. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking under his gaze. I didn't feel triumph, I felt relief, the kind that comes when you stop carrying someone else's lies. The ceremony resumed, awkwardly at first, then steadily. My name was announced again, this time without interruption. I walked the stage, the sound of applause rising hesitant, then genuine. When I accepted my degree, my hands steadied. The weight of the paper felt symbolic, lighter than the burden I had just set down. I didn't look for my father in the crowd. He was gone, and somehow that absence felt like space, room to breathe, to stand fully in myself. As I returned to my seat, classmates smiled at me, some with admiration, some with quiet understanding. No one asked questions, they didn't need to. 7 words had told the whole story. And for the first time in my life, the truth had spoken louder than fear. By the time the ceremony ended, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the campus lawn. Laughter and celebration returned in waves. As if the moment of tension had been a sudden storm, everyone was eager to forget. I stepped outside with my degree held carefully in both hands, not because it might fall, but because it felt sacred, earned in ways no one could ever take from me. Friends surrounded me with hugs and congratulations. Cameras flashed. Someone handed me flowers. For the first time that day, I smiled without forcing it. The smile didn't come from pride alone, it came from release. A chapter of my life had closed, and it hadn't closed quietly, but it had closed honestly. I noticed something then. I wasn't scanning the crowd for my father. The habit was gone. That realization surprised me more than anything else. For years, every achievement had been measured against his approval, every failure weighed by his disappointment. Now, his absence didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a boundary finally drawn. Later, while others celebrated with family dinners and plans, I sat alone on a bench near the edge of campus. The noise faded into a soft hum behind me. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone and barely recognized the person staring back. She looked calm. I thought about revenge. Not the loud, dramatic kind people imagine, but the quiet kind that doesn't poison your heart. I hadn't insulted him. I hadn't shouted or exposed secrets for entertainment. I had simply told the truth. And the truth had done what it always does when given space. It corrected the story. That was the sweetness in it. Weeks passed. My father didn't call. He didn't text. Through relatives, I heard he was furious, humiliated, even. He told anyone who would listen that I had betrayed him, that I had embarrassed the family. But something was different now. His words didn't reach me the way they once had. They had no power without my silence. I moved forward. I applied for jobs with confidence I had never known. I spoke about my journey openly, without softening it to protect anyone's image. Interviewers didn't see a bitter daughter. They saw resilience, independence, strength. When I landed my first job, I celebrated quietly, with a cup of coffee and a long walk in the evening air. I didn't feel the need to announce it. I didn't need validation. I knew what it had cost me to get there. One evening, months later, my mother called. Her voice was hesitant, careful. She told me my father wanted to talk. He wanted to clear the air. I listened in silence, then I said gently, "There's nothing to clear." I told the truth. She didn't argue. After the call ended, I felt no anger, no satisfaction, just peace. I realized then that my revenge had never been about watching him fall. It was about refusing to carry his version of me any longer, about standing in my own name without apology. That day at graduation, when 7 words changed everything, I didn't just reclaim a moment, I reclaimed myself. I framed my degree and hung it on my wall, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. Proof that even when your story is stolen, it can be rewritten, with honesty, courage, and grace. I was no longer the daughter he never noticed. I was the woman who finally noticed herself.